The message arrived on a Tuesday morning at 3:47 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, crackling through the deep space monitoring station in Arecibo like a dying star's last breath. Dr. Sarah Chen had been pulling another all-nighter, her third this week, hunting for patterns in the cosmic background radiation when the signal pierced through the static. It wasn't like anything they'd ever received before. "Jesus Christ," she whispered, her coffee mug slipping from numb fingers and shattering against the concrete floor. The sound echoed through the empty observatory, but Sarah didn't notice. Her eyes were locked on the cascade of data streaming across her monitors, each line more impossible than the last. The signal was coherent, structured, intelligent. And it was screaming. Sarah's hands trembled as she adjusted the receivers, fine-tuning the frequencies to clean up the transmission. The static cleared, and suddenly the observatory filled with a sound that would haunt her dreams for the rest of her life, a desperate, alien voice speaking in a language that somehow, impossibly, her brain could understand. "This is Commander Zefka of the Meridian science vessel Harmony's Edge," the voice said, each word dripping with exhaustion and terror. We are the last. The Kithara have found us. They have found us all. If anyone receives this message, please help us. We cannot fight them alone. The coordinates are embedded in this transmission. We are dying. We are all dying. The signal cut to static, then returned with what could only be described as the sound of screaming metal and dying creatures. Sarah sat frozen, her mind racing to process what she just heard. First contact. Real, actual first contact. And it was a cry for help. She grabbed her phone with shaking hands and dialed the emergency number for SETI headquarters. Dr. Marcus Webb answered on the second ring, his voice thick with sleep. "Sarah? It's almost 4 in the morning. This better be. Marcus, you need to get down here. Now. And call everyone. Call the Pentagon, call NASA, call whoever you have to call." Sarah's voice cracked. "We just received an SOS from an alien species." 20 minutes later, the observatory buzzed with activity. Dr. Webb had arrived with a skeleton crew of SETI's top linguists and xenobiologists, their faces pale with excitement and terror. The recording played on loop, each repetition sending chills down their spines. "The language structure is incredible," Dr. Amanda Foster whispered, her fingers dancing across her tablet as she analyzed the transmission. "It's like they're using some kind of universal translator protocol. The syntax patterns are adapting to match human linguistic frameworks in real time." "That's not what worries me," said Dr. James Morrison, SETI's senior astrophysicist. "I've run the coordinates through our stellar mapping system. The signal originated from the Kepler 442 system, about 1,200 light-years away. But Sarah, the signal strength suggests it was transmitted less than 6 hours ago." Sarah felt her blood turn to ice. "That's impossible. Even at light speed, it would take 1,200 years, yes." Morrison's face was grim. "Either they have faster-than-light communication technology, or..." He paused, swallowing hard. "Or they're much closer than the coordinates suggest." Before anyone could respond, the communications array erupted with activity. New signals were pouring in from across the galaxy, dozens of them, then hundreds. Each one was a desperate plea for help, a death cry from a dying civilization. "My God," Foster breathed, watching the data stream. "It's not just one species. It's everyone. Every intelligent civilization within 1,000 light-year radius is screaming for help." The pattern became clear over the next hour. Species after species was falling to something called the Kithara, a name that seemed to carry weight even in translation, as if the word itself was heavy with dread. The aliens spoke of ships that could devour stars, weapons that could crack planets, and an insatiable hunger that consumed everything in its path. "We need to alert the government," Webb said, reaching for his secure phone. "The president needs to know." The lights went out. Emergency power kicked in a second later, bathing the observatory in red light. But the damage was done. Every computer screen showed the same image, a star map of local space, with Earth highlighted in pulsing red. At the bottom, text scrolled in perfect English.
Signal trace complete. Coordinate lock acquired. The feast continues.
They traced us, Sarah whispered.
The SOS was bait.
They used our response to find Earth. The ground began to shake.
Outside, the night sky erupted in fire.
Massive shapes blotted out the stars, ships the size of cities, their hulls black as the void between galaxies. They moved with predatory grace, sliding through the atmosphere like sharks through water. Dear God, Morrison gasped, watching through the observatory's main window as one of the vessels descended toward San Juan.
Look at the size of them. They must be 20 kilometers long.
The ships settled into orbit around Earth with mechanical precision, their arrival synchronized to the second. As they took position, Sarah's equipment picked up a new transmission, this one broadcasting on every frequency simultaneously. People of Earth, a voice said, cold and hungry and utterly alien despite the perfect English. You have heard the cries of those who came before you.
You know what we are. You know what we do.
Surrender your world, and we will make your extinction swift. Resist, and we will feast on your suffering for 1,000 years. The transmission cut out, leaving only the sound of terrified breathing in the observatory.
We have to run, Foster said, her voice barely a whisper. We have to get to the government, tell them what we know. But before anyone could move, the ground shook again. This time, it wasn't from the alien ships. Sarah looked out the window and felt her heart stop.
Rising from behind the mountains came something impossible.
Ships. Human ships. But not like anything she'd ever seen before.
These vessels were brutal and angular, their hulls scarred by what looked like centuries of warfare.
They moved with predatory efficiency, weapons ports already glowing with contained fury. What the hell? Webb stammered. Those aren't ours. The military doesn't have anything like that. Sarah's communication equipment crackled back to life.
A new voice filled the observatory, human, but speaking with an accent she couldn't place. The words were English, but there was something ancient about the cadence, like an echo from humanity's distant past.
This is Admiral Kane of the Sol Defense Fleet, Deathworlder Division, the voice said, calm and utterly confident.
Kithara vessels, you have made a grave error. You have threatened a protected world. You have approximately 30 seconds to begin immediate withdrawal, or we will demonstrate why the galaxy calls us the Deathworlders. Sarah and her team exchanged bewildered glances.
Deathworlders? Sol Defense Fleet? None of this made sense.
The alien response came immediately, dripping with contempt.
Human vessels, you are obsolete.
Your species has been marked for harvest. Stand down, or share the fate of those who came before.
Admiral Kane's laughter filled the radio waves, cold, brutal, and utterly without fear. Obsolete? Kane said. Boy, you really don't know who you're dealing with, do you? Let me educate you.
You see, about 1,000 years ago, my ancestors left Earth on generation ships, looking for new worlds to settle. What we found out, there was a galaxy full of prey species, soft, peaceful civilizations who had never learned to fight because they never had to. The human warships began to spread out, taking attack positions with mechanical precision.
We tried to fit in, Kane continued. We tried to be peaceful, diplomatic.
But then predators like you showed up, hunting the weak, enslaving the helpless. And we realized something important: the galaxy needed predators who hunted other predators.
The galaxy needed Deathworlders. The first shots fired before Kane finished speaking. The human weapons were like nothing Sarah had ever imagined. Beams of pure energy tore through space, each one bright enough to temporarily blind the observatory's sensors.
The Kithara returned fire with weapons that seemed to bend reality itself, creating tears in spacetime that sparkled with malevolent energy. But the human ships danced between the alien attacks like they were choreographed, their movements impossibly precise.
These weren't the clumsy, experimental vessels of Earth's current technology.
These were war machines, honed by centuries of conflict.
Impossible, Morrison breathed, watching the battle unfold through their instruments.
Those ships are pulling 40G maneuvers. The crews should be paced.
Genetic modification, Kane's voice explained, as if he could hear their confusion. Bone density increased by 400%. Muscle fiber reinforcement. Neural pathway enhancement. We stopped being baseline human about 6 centuries ago. We became something better. Something designed for war. A Kythera ship exploded, its death scream echoing across radio frequencies. But more were arriving, dozens of them, then hundreds. They poured through what looked like tears in space itself, an endless stream of predatory vessels. Admiral, a new voice cut through the communications, young, female, with the same ancient accent. We're reading massive fleet deployments across 17 sectors. They're calling in everything they have.
Acknowledged, Commander Torres, Kane replied.
Signal the battle groups. Time for the real demonstration.
The space around Earth suddenly filled with new contacts. Ships appeared from nowhere, not through tears in space like the Kythera, but simply materializing as if they had been there all along, hidden by technology beyond current human understanding.
Sarah's instruments went haywire trying to count them. Hundreds of human vessels, each one unique but all sharing the same brutal, predatory design. Some were massive dreadnoughts bristling with weapons. Others were sleek destroyers that moved like hunting cats.
A few were so large they barely registered as ships at all, mobile battle stations that could probably level continents.
Holy shit, Foster whispered. Where did they all come from?
The answer came from Kane himself. When humanity spread to the stars, we didn't just colonize 1 or 2 systems.
We claimed entire sectors.
We built forge worlds and shipyards and academies. We bred warriors and engineers and tacticians.
For 1,000 years, we've been preparing for threats just like this. The battle was joined in earnest now.
The space around Earth became a hurricane of energy weapons and exotic matter. Kythera ships, each one the size of a city, died in brilliant explosions that lit up the night sky.
But for every alien vessel destroyed, 2 more seemed to take its place. Admiral, Torres's voice was strained now. They're adapting to our weapons.
Their shields are learning. Then we adapt faster, Kane replied.
All ships, switch to kinetic bombardment. Let's see how they handle good old-fashioned rocks.
The human ships began firing what looked like simple metal projectiles. But these weren't simple at all. Each rock was moving at significant fractions of light speed, and when they hit Kythera shields, the results were devastating. Exotic energy barriers that had shrugged off plasma beams crumpled like paper under the relativistic impacts. Kinetic weapons, Kane explained over the general frequency, his voice carrying a hint of amusement. Turns out when you accelerate a chunk of tungsten to 10% of light speed, all the fancy energy shields in the galaxy don't mean much. Sometimes the old ways are the best ways.
But the Kythera were learning too.
Sarah watched in horror as one of the smaller human ships, a destroyer maybe half a kilometer long, was caught in some kind of gravity weapon. The vessel stretched like taffy before simply ceasing to exist, its crew's final transmission a burst of static.
We're losing ships, Torres reported. Sir, we can't keep this up indefinitely. There are just too many of them. Kane's response was calm, almost casual. Commander, how long since the signal went out? Signal, sir? The one we sent an hour ago. The one calling for backup.
Sarah felt a chill run down her spine.
Backup? How much firepower did these humans have?
Her question was answered when the stars began to move. What she had taken for background starlight suddenly resolved into shapes, massive shapes that dwarfed even the largest Kythera vessels. Ships that looked less like vehicles and more like flying cities, their hulls scarred by eons of warfare. They moved with glacial majesty, but as they approached, the very fabric of space seemed to bend around them.
This is Fleet Admiral Sarah Reyes of the 1st Deathworlder Fleet, a new voice announced.
Even through the radio transmission, there was something intimidating about this woman, a weight of authority that came from commanding armies across the galaxy.
Kythera Swarm, you are now facing the combined might of the Sol Defense Forces. You have one final opportunity to withdraw. The alien response was swift and predictable. We are the Kythera. We have devoured 1,000 civilizations. We will not be intimidated by
Wrong answer, Admiral Reyes said. The space around Earth transformed into something beyond Sarah's ability to comprehend.
The new human fleet didn't just attack, they rewrote the rules of engagement.
Weapons that seemed to bend reality itself reached out and simply deleted Kythera vessels from existence.
Others fired what looked like miniature stars, each one bright enough to burn away the alien ship's hulls in seconds.
But it was what happened next that truly demonstrated why the galaxy feared the Deathworlders.
All ships, Reyes commanded, her voice carrying across every frequency. Execute Protocol Omega. Show them what we learned from the last predator species that threatened our protectorates.
The human fleet began to move in perfect synchronization, their formation shifting from defensive to something far more sinister. As they maneuvered, Sarah's instruments detected massive energy buildups in their cores, not just the fusion reactors she expected, but something far more exotic. They're drawing power from Earth's gravity well, Morrison said, his voice filled with awe and terror.
They're using the planet itself as a battery.
The first salvo from the coordinated fleet was beyond devastating. Beams of energy that seemed to tear holes in space itself reached out and touched the Kythera vessels.
Where the beam struck, the alien ships didn't just explode, they unraveled, their matter converted directly into energy in blinding flashes that outshone the sun. But the true horror was what happened to the Kythera crews.
We can hear them, Kane's voice said softly.
Their death screams are broadcasting on psychic frequencies. Each one contains the location of their home worlds, their fleet bases, their breeding grounds. When you kill a Kythera, you don't just destroy their body, you destroy their connection to their entire species. Sarah realized what he was saying. You're not just fighting this fleet. You're mapping their entire civilization.
Now you're starting to understand what makes us Deathworlders, Kane replied.
We don't just win battles. We end threats permanently.
The Kythera fleet began to retreat, their remaining ships attempting to flee through the same space tiers they had arrived through. But the human vessels were ready for that too. As each alien ship approached an escape portal, human destroyers appeared from nowhere, their weapons already firing. No one leaves, Reyes announced coldly. No one reports back. No one warns the rest of their kind about Earth's location. The battle raged for 3 more hours, but the outcome was never in doubt.
The Kythera had made the fundamental error of assuming that because Earth's civilization looked primitive, its defenders would be equally weak.
They had failed to account for the diaspora, the branch of humanity that had left Earth centuries ago and evolved into something far more dangerous. As the last Kythera vessel died in a burst of exotic energy, Sarah finally worked up the courage to broadcast a message to the human fleet.
"This is Dr. Sarah Chen at the Arecibo Observatory," she said, her voice shaking. We received the original SOS. We tried to help."
There was a long pause before Kane responded.
"We know, Dr. Chen. That SOS was from the Meridian Colony. They were good people, scientists and explorers, just like you. The Kythera wiped them out while we were still 2 days away."
Sarah felt tears streaming down her face.
"I'm sorry. If we hadn't responded to their signal, the Kythera wouldn't have found Earth."
"No," Admiral Reyes's voice cut in, firm but not unkind.
"If you hadn't responded, we wouldn't have had a lock on their position. That SOS led us right to them.
You helped us save not just Earth, but every other civilization they were planning to harvest." The significance of her words hit Sarah like a physical blow.
"You used us as bait." "We used Earth as a trap," Kane corrected. "The moment that first SOS went out, we knew the Kythera would follow it back to its source.
We've been setting this up for months, positioning our fleets, preparing for exactly this scenario."
Sarah's mind reeled. "Months? But how did you know?" "Because this isn't the first time," Reyes explained. "The Kythera have been hunting peaceful species for millennia, using their cries for help to locate new targets.
We've been tracking their expansion patterns, predicting where they'd strike next. Earth was always going to be on their list, you just helped us control when."
The human fleet began to disperse, some vessels returning to whatever hidden bases they had emerged from, others taking up positions around Earth's orbital space.
But several of the larger ships remained, their hulls scarred but intact.
"What happens now?"
Foster asked, her voice barely a whisper. Kane's ship moved closer to Earth, close enough that they could see details of its hull through the observatory's telescopes. It was beautiful in a terrifying way. Every line spoke of violence and efficiency, but there was an artistry to its construction that suggested these Deathworlders hadn't lost all of their humanity. Now, Kane said, we have a conversation. You see, Earth is no longer alone in the galaxy. You've just been introduced to a universe full of predators and prey. The question is, which do you want to be? A smaller vessel detached from Kane's ship and began descending toward Earth. Sarah watched it through the telescope, noting the way it moved, controlled, precise, like everything else these humans did. They're landing, she said. Good, Webb replied, straightening his tie with hands that still shook slightly. I suppose we should be ready to receive them. The landing craft touched down in the observatory's parking lot 20 minutes later. As the airlock opened, Sarah held her breath, unsure what to expect. Would these Deathworlders be monsters? Barely human at all? The figure that emerged was definitely human, but Sarah could see immediately that Kane hadn't been exaggerating about the genetic modifications. The man was tall, easily 7 feet, with muscle definition that belonged in an anatomy textbook. His skin had a faint metallic sheen, and when he turned to look at them, his eyes reflected light like a cat's. But when he smiled, it was warm and genuine, and Sarah felt some of her fear evaporate. Dr. Chen, he said, walking toward them with movements that were graceful despite his size. I'm Captain Marcus Steele, Admiral Kane's diplomatic liaison. I understand you're the one who first received the Meridian signal? Sarah nodded, not trusting her voice. You did good work today, Steele continued. That signal was the key to everything. Without it, we would never have been able to coordinate the trap. I don't understand, Morrison said, finding his voice. If you've been out there for 1,000 years, why haven't you made contact before? Why didn't you help us develop defenses? Steele's expression grew serious. Because until today, you weren't ready. Earth has been developing along a different path than the colonial worlds, focused on peace, exploration, scientific advancement. All good things, but they don't prepare a species for what's really out there. He gestured toward the sky, where the last of the Kythera debris was burning up in the atmosphere. The debate raged for days. Some argued for immediate integration with the colonies, seeing it as humanity's best chance for survival. Others insisted that becoming warriors would mean losing everything that made humanity special. Religious leaders struggled with the theological implications of genetic modification. Ethicists debated whether survival justified such fundamental changes to human nature. But throughout the discussions, more signals arrived from space. Predator fleets were on the move, converging on Earth's sector like sharks scenting blood. The window for decision-making was closing rapidly. On the 5th day, President Martinez addressed the United Nations General Assembly. Sarah watched from the observatory, where she had remained to coordinate with the colonial fleet. My fellow humans, the president began, her voice steady despite the weight of the moment. We stand at a crossroads in our species' history. The choice before us is not an easy one, but it is clear. We can remain as we are and trust in the protection of others, or we can take responsibility for our own defense. She paused, looking directly into the camera. After consulting with world leaders, military experts, and scientific advisors, I am announcing that Earth will join the Colonial Federation. We will begin the process of becoming Deathworlders. The announcement sent shockwaves around the world. Protests erupted in major cities. Some celebrated humanity's entry into a larger galactic community. Others mourned what they saw as the end of human innocence. But for Sarah, watching from the observatory as colonial ships began arriving to oversee the transition, there was only a sense of inevitability. The universe had forced this choice upon them. They could evolve or die. It's going to be a difficult transition, Steele said, joining her at the observation window. The first generation of modifications are always the hardest. Your bodies will change, your capabilities will expand, but your minds will still remember what it was like to be baseline human. Will we still be us? Sarah asked. Steele was quiet for a long moment. You'll be more than you were.
Whether that's still you depends on how you define yourself. Are you Sarah Chen the scientist, or are you Sarah Chen the human? Both, I think.
Then you'll be fine, Steele said with a smile. The colonies need good scientists more than they need good killers. There are plenty of threats out there that can't be solved with bigger guns. Over the following weeks, the transformation of Earth began in earnest. Colonial engineers arrived to begin construction of orbital shipyards and defense platforms.
Medical teams started screening volunteers for the first wave of genetic modifications.
Military advisors began training Earth's armed forces in tactics designed for space combat.
Sarah was among the first volunteers for enhancement.
As a senior scientist who had been present for first contact, she was considered essential personnel. The process would take months, she was told, with her body gradually adapting to the new genetic structure. But even as Earth prepared for its transformation, the threats continued to gather.
Long-range sensors detected massive fleet movements in distant sectors.
The destruction of the Kythera had indeed sent ripples across the galaxy, and not all the responses were friendly. We estimate 18 different predator species are moving toward this region, Admiral Reyes reported during a strategy briefing.
Some of them are far more dangerous than the Kythera.
The void-touched, for instance, exist partially outside normal spacetime.
Conventional weapons barely affect them. Can we handle them all? Asked General Harrison, Earth's top military commander. With Earth as a full member of the Federation?
Yes, Reyes replied. Your world is strategically positioned and has excellent potential for industrial development. Give us 5 years, and this system will be one of the most heavily defended in the galaxy.
And if they arrive before then? Reyes's smile was cold.
Then they'll learn why predators fear Deathworlders. 6 months after first contact, Sarah barely recognized herself in the mirror. The genetic modifications had progressed rapidly, her body adapting to the new enhancements with surprising ease. She was taller now, stronger, her reflexes enhanced to superhuman levels. Her bones were denser, her muscles more efficient. She could survive in environments that would kill a baseline human. But more importantly, her mind had adapted too. The constant awareness of threats, the tactical thinking, the readiness for violence, these had become second nature. She was still a scientist, still driven by curiosity and the desire to understand the universe. But now she was also something more. She was a Deathworlder. The first test came when the Ravager fleet arrived. They came without warning, dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of the solar system like a plague of locusts. Unlike the Kythera, who had announced themselves with threats and demands, the Ravagers simply began their attack. They were a swarm species, individual ships barely larger than fighters but numbering in the tens of thousands.
All stations, this is Admiral Kane, the familiar voice announced over the defense network. Ravager swarm detected at coordinates 77 Mark IV. All Earth Defense Forces report to battle stations.
Sarah found herself running for the Defense Command Center without conscious thought. The months of training had turned preparation into instinct. Around her, other enhanced humans moved with the same fluid efficiency, no panic, no wasted motion, just deadly purpose. The battle was unlike anything Earth had ever seen. The Ravager swarm moved like a living thing, individual ships coordinating in patterns too complex for baseline human minds to follow. But the Deathworlders were ready for them. Ravagers rely on overwhelming numbers, Kane explained over the tactical channel as Earth's defense fleet engaged.
They assume their enemies will be paralyzed by the scope of the threat.
They've never faced an opponent that thrives on impossible odds.
Sarah watched through the command center's displays as human ships tore through the swarm with brutal efficiency. But for every Ravager destroyed, more seemed to take its place. They were like a cancer, spreading through the solar system and consuming everything in their path.
Sir, Commander Torres reported, they're targeting the civilian population centers. London, Tokyo, New York, they're all under attack. Then we show them why attacking Deathworlder civilians is a mistake, Kane replied. What happened next would go down in military history as the Battle of the Home Skies. As Ravager craft descended toward Earth's major cities, they encountered something they had never faced before, a civilian population that had been trained and equipped for war.
Enhanced humans with military-grade weaponry met the aliens in the skies above Earth's cities. Former scientists wielded plasma rifles with deadly accuracy.
Artists and musicians coordinated air defense systems with the precision of career military officers. Children barely in their teens, their bodies already beginning the enhancement process, operated equipment that would have been incomprehensible to baseline humans. "The Ravagers are retreating," Torres reported, her voice filled with amazement. "Sir, they're actually fleeing from civilian resistance."
Kane's laughter filled the communication channels. That's what happens when predators meet prey that's been upgraded to predator status. They don't know how to handle it. The battle lasted 18 hours.
When it was over, the Ravager swarm had been completely destroyed. Not a single alien vessel escaped to report back to their home worlds.
Earth had passed its first test as a death war.